Hey, everybody out there in Facebook land. My name is Katrina Vaillancourt. Actually, no, Katrina is trying to get on. I am Paul Sterling. You are here joining me and John Kinyon and a group of people. And really, it's Katrina's mix is about compassionate communication and connection. And John and I put together a project called Across the Aisle, which is about, well, I'll tell a tiny bit about it that I've got, but it's really about, I watched what was happening on Facebook and how there was the two sides. There was, you're either pro-police or you're a pro-Black Lives Matter, you're a pro-Republican or you're a pro-Democrat, and it's like there was no dialogue, there was no understanding, there was no compassion in entering each other's world. So I wanted to create a safe space where we could actually hear, understand, and value each other. And I reached out to John because of all of the compassionate people in the world, John's one of my favorite, and him and I have studied with a guy named Dr. Marshall Rosenberg years ago. And so that's what this is about. And Katrina invited us on. It's like, I feel like we're throwing a party at her house and she's not able to show up. So we wanted to get diverse conversations going and practice the art of hearing, understanding, and valuing each other. And the more diverse the conversation, I think the better, because that's the only way that we're going to create for me, a world that works, is for me to be able to enter each other's worlds. And the more triggered I get about a conversation, probably the more important it is for me to be able to hear it. So, John, maybe we could jump over to you for a second and have your intro. And thank you, people that are communicating on the chat box. We see you from India here, and your comments, we will interact as much as we can with them. So, John, say hi.
Hi. Well, thanks, Paul, for that. I like how you introduced all that for today. I don't really have much more to say in terms of introduction. I really like how you kind of captured it there. And I look forward to, so in terms of process, we're experimenting with the best ways to do this, but to set up a process where we take turns trying to hear each other, particularly where we have differences or strong differences of perspective, opinion in the political realm, particularly, and just doing what Paul just said. So I'm looking forward to being with our guest today, and who Katrina has gotten together, us all together to do this. And I'm just grateful to all of you. Looks like Chris and Lance and Happy and Free.
Which one's happy? Which one's free?
Oh, I'm happy and he's free. So the names are lined up appropriately.
Nice.
Perfect.
Well, you're a nice combination together there.
Thank you.
So, yeah. Paul.
And at some point, John, we may put to get more people on here. I think we can have up to 10 people on here. And I know that there were some other people that were going to be here that aren't. So we can also put that out into Facebook land. And if people want to jump on, they can be heard too. And I just want to, let me give a quick example. So, Chris, can I use you for a second? Would that be okay? All right.
Sure.
And if everybody would do this, and everybody in Facebook land at the same time, so everybody here on the call that we can see, but if you could put your hands together like this for a second, just, all right. And when I say go, press really hard with your right hand. All right. Ready, get set, go, press harder, press harder, press harder, press harder. Okay, stop. So, Chris, I'll use you. Where did your hands end up? Pretty much where they started, right?
Same spot.
So now press with your right hand and don't resist with your left. What happens?
A lot of movement.
So in most communication, well, not most communication, a lot of communication, we end up with this push, counter push, and there's no movement. So the idea here is we want to communicate in a way that doesn't create resistance. And the more that I notice that I communicate with force and commitment, the more resistance I get. So what we want to do is be able to hear each other and have little resistance and be able to go back and forth. So, John, do you have somebody you'd like to start with here?
Well, let me say a little bit more about the specifics of the process as we've been refining it. And again, to underscore, Paul, what you already said, but the goal is to try to hear, understand, and sort of respect one another as people, even if we are disagreeing. So it's not easy. It may sound conceptually easy in some ways, but it can be extremely difficult to hear and understand when we disagree, and that those are not the same things. If we understand, it doesn't mean we agree. So that's what the process is to do that. And there is Paul and I, as you mentioned, come out of a body of work called Nonviolent Communication or Compassionate Communication. And we'll be bringing in some elements of that. But for me, the main practice is to just try to hear each other, even if we don't agree, and see if we can find something at a deep level of understanding where we share as human beings, where we have a common experience of what we all care about. So we can try to get to that level as well. So we just start with one person expressing as succinctly as you can, kind of putting out there some position or belief or perspective in the political realm that you'd like to state that's important to you. And then we'll try to get the next person to come on that would first reflect back what you heard and then say your perspective, if it's particularly different one. And we'll just keep going then to the next person and the next person. Each person that comes on, if you're willing to say what you heard the previous person say, and only till that person feels heard, then your turn to say what you want to say. So does that sound okay to everybody? Chris, Lance, happy, free, willing to give that process a try? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Then it's just who wants to go first, and feel free to be as controversial as you'd like. And hopefully this is a safe space that you'll be heard for what you want to say, not judged or criticized or anything like that. So would one of you like to venture first into the space and saying something? Okay, Chris, beautiful. So, Chris, what would you like to put out there, maybe, that's important to you?
Sure. Now, I could give a 45-second ramble on my political background, if that's helpful, or we could just get right into a particular position. I'm not sure what would be more beneficial for the group.
I am so glad you asked that, Chris. Thank you for asking. What we've been finding now in terms of process is actually, if there's too much of that first one, it can get people get lost. But if you can more maybe just get right to the heart of what you want to say that may be controversial to people here, we'll see. But just as quick as you can kind of get there, and maybe how you feel about it, like kind of where it's coming from in you, but pretty quickly just try to take your position on what's important to you.
Got it. Okay. So controversial position might be that I see that Trump is a demagogue. And because of that, and based on my understanding of what that word means and what's entailed with it, I do not support him for president, and I want to see that he is no longer in office.
Okay. So at first, I'm going to do a little modeling of just reflecting back what I heard you say, and then I'll see who the next person might like to go next, especially if they have a different opinion than what you just expressed. So I don't know that I'll always do this to this degree, but let me start off just what I heard. So I heard you say that you think President Trump is a demagogue. So I heard you use those words, and that you don't want him to be president. So let me flesh out a little bit more of what I'm hearing or guessing at in there, that by the behaviors you've seen from him, you are very concerned about the impact he's having on the country, and certain things you care about for yourself and the whole country, you don't see him providing, or maybe providing in some opposite way to what you value or care about. Is that right?
Well, you spoke a little bit to like the impacts that he's having as a president, which I didn't explicitly say myself about. And I could go there, but maybe a more concrete concern would be that I'm worried about his desire to stay in power. When I see things like him saying that he doesn't want to concede the election in a peaceful transition of power, that to me that's like a disqualification for someone to be the president of the United States, and fits into that whole demagoguery concept that I was talking about.
Right. Okay. So there's an example of something that you would call kind of a demagogic, sort of example of that, right? And maybe just before I try to get the next person on, is there something you'd say, like what you want or value that isn't, that there's something you care about, that when you see him behave in this kind of way that you're calling kind of like acting like a demagogue, there's things that you care about that you're wanting that's not in service of, right? So maybe just say in your own words, a few of those, like what are those things that you care about that you would want for our country, say for the US and the world, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I think well-functioning systems is on a broad level something that's really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have a particular process within our democratic system that we use, and when I see that someone is, especially someone like the president of the United States, is saying things that create, in my evaluation, dysfunction in the system by saying things like deferring away from the answer of whether or not he'll commit to a peaceful transition in power, to me that seems to go against my valuing of well-functioning systems.
Okay, well-functioning, like healthy functioning systems of government. Yes? Healthy for the population and good functioning systems of governance. Yeah? Okay, great.
Yeah,
thank you.
So it goes into like social cohesion, other things like that, but I think those are separate topics that we don't need to necessarily get into now. But yeah, I would say that you got it.
Okay, well, it could be related to kind of social cohesion as well as healthy functioning of a government systems. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Relationship is actually the main principle there. I'd say right relationship, and you can see how that fits into all these different pieces: systems, people with people, interdependency with us in nature, blah 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 blah. So.
Okay, that concept might take some unpacking for people not familiar with that phrase, but I think from what you've said, it's those are some of the things that, like the values that maybe a lot of people or just about anybody could relate to on some level. So I appreciate you saying that. And welcome, Katrina. I see Katrina has solved her computer problem issue. So glad you could make it. Paul has been doing a really wonderful job of jumping into the facilitator role. My judgment. Wonderful. So we're just going to carry on then, unless you want to say anything in this moment, Katrina, or do you want us to we already started into the process?
I just appreciate all your flexibility because yes, I had crazy technical challenges this morning, and I'm grateful to be joining in, and I'll just jump in as it makes sense.
Okay, great. And Paul, you good for me to carry on, or anything you're wanting to say at this point? And you're muted. You are muted, Paul. Still muted. Yeah.
actually, all that work to say, you're doing great, John. Keep going. And I love how Chris said it. And boy, did I have my whole list of my own things come up as he spoke. So it was very interesting to hear him voice that side of it. So I love the process here, and I'll wait till maybe at some point it'd be, a chance for me to contribute. But I think right now I'm just going to watch the process.
Okay.
And
So then in terms of the process, next step is somebody that would want to speak next, and ideally one of you that has an opposing or different opinion than Chris just shared. So we can really model how we can try to, share different perspectives and try to hear each other's differences, even if we don't agree, right? So ideally someone who has some kind of difference there with Chris. And then though, after that, we'll go to another person. So it won't just like be a mediation between Chris and that person back and forth. It'll just be going to the next person and the next person, the next person. So that way we'll get lots of different, hopefully different voices of all of us on the call and anybody else that might join us. Okay. So for Lance, Happy, Free, one of you want to go next? Looks like Happy does. Is that okay with you, Lance? All right. I'm assuming it's okay with you, Free, since you're sitting next to Happy. Yeah. So Happy, are you willing, before you express something from your perspective, in your own words, from what you've heard Chris say and Chris and I going back and forth about what he said, just kind of let him know what you heard without having to agree with it, just what you heard?
Absolutely. Hi, Chris. Hello, everybody. Yes, so I appreciate you sharing, and succinctly you had said that you felt that he's acting like or is a demagogue. And just to be clear for everyone, I really like to clarify with definitions. So according to Merriam-Webster's, a demagogue is a political leader who seeks support by appealing to popular desires and prejudices rather than by using rational argument. Would you think that's somewhat of what you're appealing to, Chris? Could I just say, and I'm not trying to disagree with that or argue.
You're defining it. Yeah, you're defining it. Yeah. So Chris, is that definition resonating with demagogue for you?
Yeah, yes. There's some aspects of the strategies that demagogues use that definition doesn't get into, but I'd say for our conversation now, that's a good place to start. So yes.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Happy, for actually doing a little research on the term. What else did you hear from Chris about that?
Well, I heard that he would like that he's not in support of that he's concerned about our future, because one of the aspects of acting as a demagogue is that he feels that the president might not concede the election if he loses the election. And so that's was his first concern.
Yeah, well, that he's heard President Trump say that he may not, something like that. That's what Chris was. Yeah. Basically, that I realize I'm jumping in. So maybe just what you heard Chris say in terms of that example. Maybe that is important to really be precise. So how did you hear? Could you say it again? Actually, how you heard Chris say that example, that he's as an example of it that he's concerned of?
I'm not sure how else to say it. I think I was pretty succinct with that.
Okay. All right. Well, let's check. And is there anything else you heard beyond that example of from Chris? Maybe kind of like what's important to him. What is he? What's he wanting?
General feeling that he had of concern with his relationship to his power, I would say. Would that be?
Yeah. Okay. We'll check with Chris in a moment. And I heard that like kind of some things I was sort of pulling out of Chris at the end, what he's wanting, that he's concerned when he sees this behavior, kind of what his hope or wanting for the country. Did you hear anything about that part of it or remember?
Well,
if not, that's fine.
I mean, he's hoping for unity in our country. I would say that was the gist of what I'm hearing.
Okay. Unity. All right, Chris, back to you to clarify where you feel heard, if there's any place you don't, or you want to clarify a bit more from what Happy reflected.
Sure. Yeah. One thing that definition, I'm just realizing as you're reflecting back to me, one of the things that the definition doesn't particularly state, but that's a function of a demagogue from the research that I've done, is someone that either like threatens to or actually does challenge like the normal functioning of a political system. And so that last part there is the connection into this concept of not ceding power, let's say peacefully, or at least not agreeing that he would. And then in terms of unity, it's probably more like harmony, but I think maybe we're getting into the details there. Unity seems to be like atomistic, where everyone's saying yes to the same thing or is exactly the same, whereas harmony, there's like a kind of cohesion within differences that people have.
Well, let's use your words for you, and then Happy can express it how maybe she would like. But for you, harmony, and then kind of like what you said about the health of the systems of government. Yeah, kind of those two things. So Happy, are you just reflecting those two things back? That Chris is wanting, concerned that this behavior from President Trump is not meeting.
I hear that. Yes.
Are you willing to say the words back? I just found it's useful. Yeah.
He's concerned that there should be harmony and a system of government that is
healthy
and working, functional,
well functioning. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Happy. And now the space is yours to express what you would like that's important to you, how you see things, and along these lines.
Thank you for listening. And I also feel the same way you do, Chris, concern about the health of our governance and that the system is functioning. And my perspective is that I'm really a researcher who prefers to go for truth rather than popularity, the opposite of a demagogue, you could say. And so in doing this research, what I realized is that there's a lot of gossip going on and name calling. And for me, as much as we're wishing to define terms, we can call people all kinds of names, and calling someone a demagogue to some extent, because I can see you're a very intelligent person, is a little bit beneath us to just start off with a kind of a name calling. That's very easy to do instead of looking very specifically. So I didn't hear a lot of specifics. I heard general terms based on an assumption. And so I'd like to say that I've been a lifelong Democrat. I voted for Obama, and I didn't vote for anyone because we were in Cambodia. And when we were in Cambodia, what we found out is that this president, the current president, who was elected, that he was anti-vaccine. And that surprised me because I put on a health festival. So what happened is it's led me along this path of research and discovery to realize that my assumptions were incorrect and that I had made a lot of investment in believing mainstream media. And when I looked behind the curtain, it shocked me to realize how much corruption is going on. So what has happened is it's led me all the way to finding out all the compassionate things and logical things, the opposite of a demagogue, that this president has done for this country. Lance, I'm sure you're familiar with the HBCUs, the historic Black colleges and universities that have record funding that have made Black lives really matter more than ever in those educational ways to bring power to the people. I'm really a person who is compassionate about gasoline and the lives in the Middle East. And every gallon of gasoline used to, before Trump, equal 1 gallon of blood of people dying needlessly so that Americans can drive our cars, buses, airplanes. So today, due to the compassion of the president, he has made our country oil independent so that we can release ourselves. That's why this current president has been nominated 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize.
So Happy, can I just jump in, just to, not to cut you off, but I just want to see, so if I'm following that, you actually are saying some observations you have of the president, of President Trump, that you believe are actually very beneficial in certain ways, right? That you're describing. So I think you gave 3 examples at least.
There's hundreds.
What's that?
Hundreds of examples. And we met the president yesterday.
But in terms of what you've just said, right? At least 3 things you've said that where pretty, examples where you, I think you said it gives you an experience of compassion for helping people or making life better in certain ways. Yeah. So that's kind of a different perspective on that Chris was saying. And it's, to me, it's not about you and Chris. It's more just putting out different perspectives. So your perspective is you've done research, and what you found in terms of vaccines, in terms of supporting Black community, in terms of maybe supporting people in the Middle East and war-torn countries where there's oil. These are 3 examples that you really see things from President Trump that you believe are very, very helpful to people, right?
Yes, I'd just like to say that yesterday it culminated in us meeting Donald Trump. And so he flew into our local tiny airport, 4 miles from our house. We would have never thought lifelong Democrats would go and meet the president. But because I don't listen to gossip, I'm anti-gossip, which is I don't listen to NPR very seriously or things like that. I go right to the Trump tweets and I listen to the entire speeches, not the clip speeches, which cause confusion. But because we have listened for hundreds of hours to the president, hear from his mouth, we know that he never is talking about not conceding.
So instead of filtered through media, mainstream media, you've really tried to go right to the source of things he's tweeting or saying, and you're saying this is your experience at this point.
It's compassionate. It's out of compassion and out of a reverence for truth rather than being a gossip.
Okay. So thank you for sharing that. And I'd like to see if somebody else wants to, besides me, is willing to say what they heard you say, even if they disagree with some of those things.
All right.
Okay.
Looks like
Lance,
it's my turn. Yeah.
You want to give it a shot, Lance?
Sure.
All right.
She said a lot, and then you repeated a bunch of it. But for me to repeat it,
just the essence.
The essence is that you felt in your reflection to Chris that he, by using the word demagogue, was actually calling, he was name calling, and that you had said you're a lifelong researcher and you're more interested in truth than gossip. You have done your own research because you had heard things about Trump and you investigated more deeply. It sounds like your investigation was listening more to Trump directly versus listening to other people or pundits' opinions or perspectives. You say both.
Yeah.
I also noticed that you use the word mainstream media, and then you listed a few, like the 3 examples of Middle East gas. The one that John didn't mention, which was the Nobel Prize nominations 3 times. and then obviously you recently saw Trump, and you feel that he's a compassionate being. How's that?
How's that, Happy?
I would say you did very well, considering you have a very different opinion, possibly.
You can probably hear that coming.
Now he's a warrior and compassionate.
Yeah.
Okay. So Happy, are you feeling heard and understood?
I am. I think you did an awesome job, Lance.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Lance. Thank you. And so let me just pause there for a moment, Lance, just to check in with my fellow facilitators here and just see how we're doing on process and time and all that. So Paul and Katrina, thumbs up from Katrina. Paul, is there anything you're wanting to?
Yeah, I watched myself on, bouncing back and forth, and it's so rich to actually really just stay with it and be with it and not go right to my interrupting reactive behavior that's normal. And Lance, thank you so much for doing it, and happy for expressing yourself clearly and compassionately. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Lance has to say, and I'm enjoying the process, even the discomfort of it. I can feel myself stretching and kind of going, oh, wow. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One moment, I'd love a quote that I love, which is pertinent right now, from F. Scott Fitzgerald. The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time.
Uh-huh. Yeah, this does take a lot of our human capacity to do what we're doing here today. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Free. So Lance.
It's good to be comfortable in the state of cognitive dissonance.
Yes, indeed. Not easy. Also very difficult to do. So Lance, again, thank you for the effort to say things that maybe were not easy to say, or maybe just, that you have different opinion on. So I appreciate your effort there. Now your turn. And if you can, it's kind of getting right to the heart of it doesn't have to be directly opposed to what Happy just said, but just some perspective you'd like to share that's dear to your heart that maybe you think could be, creating a difference of opinion here.
Okay. I obviously have some natural or internal pushback to some of the things that Happy was saying and her characterizations of Trump. My bigger concern, though, is that that our system of government and society is on the verge of collapse, and as a person who is independent, neither Democratic nor Republican, although as an African American, my interests have been served by the Democratic Party much more often over the years. And that just is how it's sized up for me. My concern is that as I've watched enough election cycles happen and sort of witnessed the cycling back and forth between the poles of right and left, that it's bigger than just politics. Like, Trump is not the problem; he's just the symptom. And the problem, though, is in our willingness to identify with these polarities. And the part of where I agree with around why Trump fits the description of demagogue is because he makes a conscious effort to push at the extremes, at the polarities, and not actually towards solutions. And I think that's where just that basic definition from Webster's or whatever talked about what a demagogue is. And I think that's the classic textbook definition.
So in terms of what you see his behavior, to kind of what the effect of it is this polarizing of the extremes and creating more kind of conflict and dissonance in society and people like that. That's something you're observing that is quite concerning to you. Yes, that's sort of even beyond the politics of Republican Democrat, just at a pure kind of social cohesion level. Is that right?
Yes. And the part that is troubling to me is how what his original campaign lead, Steve Bannon, has described as the strategy that Trump is employing is called flooding the zone, which is just dumping so much information that people can't really hold it all. And because it is all emotionally triggering, people's nervous systems get dysregulated and they lose their ability for critical thinking because they're all in their fight or flight response.
So again, you see, maybe you believe that President Trump and those supporting him are sort of doing this way of using information that floods and gets people confused, and that it's a tactic, right? Now, not everyone necessarily would agree with that, but that's how when you see what's going on, that's your take on what's happening, and you're concerned for the effect on the population. Yes.
Right, because the polarization is increasing, right? And even before Trump got in, we were already in that state of happening. Obviously, the first Black president was another example of how polarized the system could get from the beginning, from a person who was actually trying to be a centrist and still being polarized.
So it's been going on for not just since Trump has been president, but even it's been going on for a while. So I'm kind of watching time and trying to a sense of how much you feel like you want to say versus like getting the next person to reflect what you're saying. Do you want to say a little bit of like what you want, that you're concerned when you see all this from your perspective? What are you wanting?
Okay, I have the same fear that that Chris has, that Trump is going to do what he says he's going to do, which is not agree with the peaceful transition of power, and that he is, and I've seen in my research that he is going to foment chaos and ideally, I think in his mind, civil war.
So you think this is what could happen. You feel afraid of that. And what you're wanting is harmony, cohesion. What would be your words for it?
Cohesion, harmony. That's definitely sort of a fantasy, but I would definitely like to see more cohesion where we can get back to I don't even like debating, because debating is a zero-sum game. And as you know, as an NVC expert, conversation is a collaboration,
like constructive conversation, and a certain kind of social cohesion. Like that's what you're wanting, and you're seeing it going further and further from that, and you're quite concerned.
Yeah, and at the same time, I also believe that the system was corrupt in its foundation. So I'm not totally against the complete and total destruction of it. So I see value in Trump and the role that he plays.
Okay, so there could be a value in terms of that effect of like the system being upended and maybe ultimately made better in the end. So do you feel like, because there are a lot of pieces in what you're saying, does that feel complete enough for the moment?
That feels complete enough for the moment.
Awesome. Thank you, Lance, for putting that out there. And I'm thinking maybe Free, are you up for saying what you heard Lance say, even if you disagree with parts of it, just to let them know what you heard in your own words, what you heard him say, though, focusing on what he said.
Yes. Well, what I heard Lance say was that, similar to Chris's concerns about Trump being a demagogue and being a polarizing figure, that he has concerns for the system collapsing, falling apart, perhaps as Chris does as well. And as far as exactly why Trump is that polarizing figure, it's not entirely clear. He even said, well, the system was divided before Trump got in there, so it's not just about Trump. The system was divided during the Obama days as well, and probably would be divided even if Trump didn't get elected. There's still going to be tensions. Am I hearing you correctly, Lance?
Yes.
Yeah, on that part. Okay. What else, Free? Anything else you heard there?
Well, I heard a deep concern, a personal concern also. And I heard fear. I heard fear about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
If he gets elected or if he doesn't get elected. I mean, really, we don't know at this juncture. No one knows.
Yeah.
And a primary concern, like Chris, was that Trump was not going to concede the election. Or that there would be a peaceful transition if he doesn't get honestly elected, which is there's a little bit of insecurity around the electoral system right now, as far as how honest is this system, or how corrupt is the system right now in terms of manipulating votes, one way or the other, for that matter. And so we don't have a lot of confidence in our system, which creates fear.
So you heard different things about that from Lance. And in terms of what he wants, last piece, kind of what, in his words, kind of what he is concerned about and wanting. What is he wanting, at some level that maybe we all could relate to at a deeper level? What did you hear his words for that?
Well, I didn't hear the word harmony, but that was the feeling that I got, like Chris, that he would like harmony. I think we all would love harmony in our world.
Yeah.
If we don't agree with each other, we would love harmony. And that's the joy of life, and love. And all those things can emerge even more extensively when there's not so much division. Yeah,
so he's nodding to that. And I also heard him say, talk about that kind of cohesion, social cohesion, and and dialogue, where we can talk to each other about our differences and work together, sort of like maybe what you heard about that, if you remember that part of it.
Yeah, I don't quite recall his exact words in that.
Okay. Well, let's let Lance. How is that, Lance? Are you feeling heard? Anything you want to clarify?
Yeah, I'm feeling heard enough to get more feedback or to respond to others. I feel like my main points were heard.
Okay, great. All right. So I'd like Free to have a chance to complete, everybody having a chance to speak. I just, again, want to check in with Paul or Katrina, anything, how we're doing that you want to add, or ready to hear from Free? Yeah. Okay. So if you'd like, Free, and if you want to, in a kind of narrowing down, if you can, to some particular point you'd like to share that might be different than what's been spoken?
Well, I don't know if they'll be different necessarily. Clearly, everyone is doing their own research. That seems to be common ground here. Of course, the methods by which we do our own research and the sources from which we do our research may be very different. Or some may be more extensive than others. And what I've noticed in my research being true to that quote, which I gave as I do research both sides of the perspectives, and pick what seems congruent with a sense of integrity in the system of, call it truth or whatever, even though that could be considered a relative term. But if you draw from both sides of this political spectrum, which by the way are just purely arbitrary, they're arbitrary in our own minds, and they're also arbitrary in terms of the media from which we get our sustenance, from which we get our sources, from where we get our distortions also.
So you're kind of pointing to how do we know truth, and what are the kind of, these ways that we have, and maybe now how to get to truth. Yeah, you're kind of talking about how you're trying your own journey there. Is that right?
Well, the journey of seeking truth, and then this resonant aha, and each one of us has one, where we recognize truth when we put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Yeah.
And if the puzzle's like 5 pieces, then put the puzzle together, that's our reality, that's our world. If there's a billion pieces in the puzzle, and you put the billion pieces of the puzzle together, you're going to have a much broader view of what's real, what's true, what's possible. And I think each individual pieces it together for themselves in that regard, from different sources that have agendas behind that which we have to recognize.
So different agendas behind different sources, trying to recognize that. Now, do you want to, given that we're going to run out of time pretty quick, do you want to, from the research you've done, from these different sources of kind of diversity of trying to get to some truth, is there another something you want to put out there that might be controversial for this group? I don't know, that you've come to, kind of how it's distilled in you of a kind of sense of what's true that maybe others might not agree with.
For 30 years, I researched and taught sovereignty under the alias of Johnny Liberty. And so I understood and learned, started 30 years ago, studying power structures and systems and media and all these things to see how we could reintroduce the notion of sovereignty, personal sovereignty, national sovereignty, indigenous sovereignty, etc.
Okay.
So that's the context from which I come. And so why I am supporting Trump over Biden is because in my hearing him and listening to him, even from day one, he is a sovereignty-oriented human being, and he's also a sovereignty president, the first one we've ever had, probably since maybe Lincoln or the founding fathers or something like that, addressing the United Nations and all these things. So even the banner America First isn't selfish. It's about restoring sovereignty as the foundation of human beings, but also the foundation for nation states. And until we get sovereignty in place, there's another power structure that's pulling the strings of this whole system. And then
okay, sovereignty versus kind of being controlled or in a controlling system, but in opposed to that is a kind of that's how you're the context of sovereignty, because that we could take some time to unpack that, but given that we're almost out of time, I think it's pretty clear from what you, at least to me, that this idea sovereignty in relation to sort of a controlling system, and you see President Trump as someone actually standing for sovereignty. Yeah,
standing for sovereignty and restoring the constitutional republic and the checks and balances, which he has actually been quite obedient to.
Okay.
For the constitutional system, imperfect as it might have been back then, but then again today.
Okay, so you see him, and I'm sorry to keep jumping in, but just I want to complete before we run out of time. But I just see, that you're saying you actually see that he's supporting Constitution strength, and okay.
He's a freedom fighter, and he's fighting for all of our freedoms. He's a tough guy. I don't necessarily like his personality, but it takes a tough person to handle the types of corruption that he inherited when he became president.
Okay, well, I appreciate you getting kind of that specific at the end there. Thank you. All right. So, Katrina, we're going to run out of time in a few minutes. I'm thinking maybe Paul, if you one of you wants to reflect that back, and then we wrap up. So I'm curious how the two of you want to work with this last piece.
I'd love to reflect back what I'm hearing. Paul, did you have something as well?
I'll let you reflect back first, and then there was something that I noticed for me in there that I wanted to kind of close on. And
okay. Yeah. So, Free, I really heard you talking about the depth of research that can be done and how important it is to be able to look at multiple channels of news, but also to understand who their maybe corporate sponsors would be, or why they might have a particular bias, or why they might present the news as they do. So to not just take news at face value, but to understand what's driving the narrative that they might be sharing. And it sounds like in your experience, by really listening to many diverse channels, especially through the work that you've done with this profound value for sovereignty, human sovereignty, which I understand sovereignty to be self-governing rather than a power structure and a hierarchy and something governs over me. There's a wisdom within me, and sovereignty is self-governing. So I hear that's a deep and profound value that you've had for many years, and you've made it part of your life's work. And when you've done your research and you've looked at all of these different news stations and maybe, who's pulling their financial strings, and who's deciding what direction they're going to lean, that has been a lens through which you've been doing your research and sharing what you've come to learn. And from what you've seen, the conclusion that you've drawn is that Trump is the most sovereign president we've seen. I heard you say since maybe Lincoln or the founding fathers. And of course, the founding fathers were seeking to have sovereignty from English rule. So that's a pretty big statement that you made around the conclusion that you've come to, that Trump is sovereign in himself, and that he's seeking to maintain the checks and balances and the integrity of the U.S. Constitution on behalf of what I heard is like on behalf of all people. That's the role he's playing, and maybe I see you nodding. So that's that's what I heard, and that you're really seeing this fight for the sovereign being as opposed to the potential that we have for power grabs and hierarchy and that taking so much momentum that we lose sovereignty as human beings. So
very good.
That's what I heard.
Good summary. Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
So we're at the top of the hour. Paul sounded like we had something. Chris is in the chat with something maybe he wanted to clarify. So Katrina, it's your show. So how'd you like to handle this?
Goodness. I just want to pop in a word that I learned recently, which is synarchy. And I loved this word because it's not anarchy and it's not hierarchy. Synarchy is about sovereign beings coming together in their creative divine flow, as I see we're doing here with the creation of Across the Aisle, in service to humanity, where there isn't a power over, power under, but there's a natural joy in sharing of power in a co-creative service format. So I'm going to share that. I'm going to pass it to Paul. And then I think what we'll need to do is wrap up, but I want people to know about upcoming offerings that you, John, have or Paul has. And of course, the Love Smart cards is a tool for being able to build this form of compassionate understanding for ourselves and for other people.
Well, firstly, thank you, Katrina. Thank you, John. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Happy Free. I noticed that there were places where if we got to the essence of it, I could connect everybody. And then what created some challenge for me is the different strategies, and strategies stated as facts. Like, this is the way it is. And then I watch myself get pulled out of the conversation. So I really appreciate the dialogue today. I realize there's a part of me that wants to be heard, and that's going to have to wait till John and I do the next across the aisle.
Tomorrow.
I am just, you said to say something. I wrote a best-selling book, Argue Less, Love More. I can put a link. People can get on my website and get a free copy of it. And it's really about how do you do this kind of dialogue in a relationship where you can have different opinions and not do it with a dance rather than a battle. And I appreciate having people on with diverse opinions here, and I would have loved to spend more time. And Chris, I hear you. There's probably a lot that you would want to have said, and everybody, because it's an ongoing dance. What I love about this country is that we have certain liberties to communicate our varied opinions. So thank you, Katrina, for that. And I'll put it up in the post in the window there where they can get the book if they want it.
We have it scrolling down at the bottom here. We've got John Kinyon's site.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Love More and Love Smart Cards, so you can get more information on those.
Okay, yes. The Argue Less, Love More. It's .net, not .com.
.net. Oh, right. I thought I had looked it up on Google. .net.
So it doesn't matter. They'll get there either way. I've got both of them.
All right. Yeah. Yeah, I want to thank all of our guests for being here. I know that this is just a drop in the bucket of the dialogue that could happen, to only have this short amount of time. And I really appreciate how everybody came with an open heart, with really well thought out perspectives around what they've seen happening in politics. I'm seeing, I know Free has written a book, Dawning of the Corona Age. So if people are interested in what Free's research has been around the coronavirus and what he sees going on, he does have a book that's available. Did you want to say quickly where that one's available?
LibertyInternationalBooks.com.
Great, thank you. Thank you. John, I know you have a meditation Wednesday. You have a number of offerings. You've got your meditation, you have your mini coaching session, and then across the aisle in the evening, as well as upcoming workshops. Did you want to give a bit of a share about those?
I mean, the main thing I want to, in the context of why we've gathered here, I want to just say with tomorrow evening, and Paul and I have been doing this, and we're adding Katrina and another person as well, Corey. 4 of us are going to facilitate a very similar kind of conversation as we had today, just to continue to have space to hear each other across these differences. And that's tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific, it starts, and you can get information if you follow the web links. But yeah, I just also want to echo what you said, Katrina, to Chris and Lance, Happy Free. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this. I actually feel moved. I feel my mind kind of expanded and just holding different viewpoints. And I just feel really moved, actually, that we did this together and that you all showed up. And just thank you. Thank you so much. I think this is the way we're going to, survive and thrive as a country, as a world of people. To do this hard work. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Katrina, for hosting it. Thank you, Paul, for showing up today. Really just enjoyed it and feel inspired.
Absolutely. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Enjoy life. It's a great journey.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.